Hey, 2033. It's Dr. Wilderman again. We're going to continue today talking about the ABCs of journalism. We are on clarity right now. So, again, if you'll remember us talking about the ABCs of journalism, the A stood for accuracy and the B stood for brevity. And so now we're on to C, which stands for clarity, or just your writing being clear. Clarity really means finding the right word choices to make your point in the most straightforward manner possible. The opposite of clarity in our writing is clutter. And so I know that you've spent some time working on some assignments where you're editing for brevity. And what I'm hoping you're really seeing is that accuracy, brevity, and clarity, all three work together to make your media writing as good as it can possibly be, as easy to understand, as informative as possible, but with very little, if any, clutter. Being clear in your writing leads to the audience being able to understand you easier, right? And if your audience can understand you, if they know what points you're making and it isn't confusing, then they are actually more likely to trust you, which is very important as a media practitioner. What I want you to think about is think back to maybe an essay or something you were writing for high school, maybe an essay you were writing for a college application or just an English class. And I want you to think about that word count, right? I think that sometimes we do a bad job early in your education of kind of giving you this idea that stretching your words, adding words to get to a word count is good writing or is important to writing. And then you get into this class, and that's pretty much the opposite of what we want you to do. We don't want you stretching your writing. We don't want you adding words just to get to a word count. We want every word to count. And I would rather have, if I tell you a story should be 300 words, if it is 280 words and it is solidly done and there's no more questions left to ask and you've explained everything well, I would much rather you leave that story at 280 than add in 20 words of, nothing helpful to get to 300. So that might be a little bit of a difference in the types of writing that you've done in high school, or in other classes and in this particular class. All right. So, what can help you with clarity in your writing? I have a list of, I think, 6 tips. So, first of all, a lot of this is stuff you've heard already, but we're going to apply it a little differently. To help with clarity in writing, we want you to avoid cliches and jargon. So remember, cliches aren't clever. They're these overused phrases. The first person who thought of it was clever, but now they're just taking up space and it's not your own writing. Just don't use them in media writing. Jargon, though, is different than a cliche. Jargon is like the technical terms. It could be from any industry. So what I'm going to use here is an example of in the medical industry. If you're writing a story that has to do with heart attacks or somebody having a heart attack, the technical medical term for that is myocardial infarction. But unless you're writing a medical textbook, you should just use the more layman's terms, heart attack. That's going to help people understand you a lot easier than using that technical medical jargon. All right, so avoid cliches and jargon. What else can help you with clarity in your writing? Check your vocabulary. Does that word actually mean what you think it does? We all have blind spots like this, right? We all have words that confuse us, words that we're not 100% clear in the meaning. Look them up. There's probably some similar words out there, or maybe not even that similar, that you confuse. For me, a set of words that for some reason on occasion I still have to look up: confiscate and obfuscate. Confiscate means to take, obfuscate means actually to make something less understandable, less clear. Those 2 words don't mean the same thing. They sound a tiny bit similar, but in my brain, I got to look that up sometimes still. No harm in looking it up. I would rather look something up than be wrong about what the word means. Okay, what else can you do to help with clarity in writing? Don't use the big word when the smaller word will do just fine. I'm not saying we can't use big vocabulary words, we can, but we don't need to use them just for the heck of it, just to try to sound smart. So consider the following sentence that's down on this slide in bold. So the sentence says, let's look at the abbreviated version of the policy. There's nothing wrong with the word abbreviated, but I might just go ahead and use something simpler like short. Let's look at the short version of the policy. Abbreviated and short mean the same thing, and short is just a simpler, more straightforward word. Unless there's a real reason to use abbreviated in that sentence, I'm going to probably change it to something a bit more simple. All right, so continuing, what can help with clarity in writing? A lesson you've already had. We're gonna keep on you about it over the semester. Use active voice and write in that SVO order: subject, verb, object. Stay in active voice, right? Have the main verb engaged in the have the main noun engaged in the main verb toward the beginning of the sentence. What is the sentence really about? Start with that at the beginning of the sentence. Another thing you can do to help with clarity of your writing is to edit yourself, right? Edit your own work. If you can cut a word or phrase out of a sentence and maintain the meaning, do it. Remember, omit useless words. All right. If you can cut it out of the sentence and the sentence maintains that full meaning, it doesn't need to be there. Now, don't over edit. Don't cut out words that, need to be there for meaning. But yeah, edit your work. Something that the Phylic text mentions that can really help with clarity, it's a bigger picture issue. It's not such a small picture issue like edit out one word. It talks about the pace and flow of our sentences, right? And what the Phylic text mentions when it talks about this is the sentences not being too short and not being too long. There's kind of a middle ground that our brains really enjoy for sentences. And so if you feel that a sentence is getting too long, maybe look at making it 2 sentences. Another thing that helps is variation in our sentence length. If you try it sometime, write out a paragraph and try to make the sentences all right about the same length. Say that every sentence is 5 words, and you do that for 5 or 6 sentences in a row. It's going to start to sound really weird. It's going to sound staccato and stilted and not like the way we speak. So actually it helps to have variations in our sentence lengths to go from a bit of a longer sentence back to a shorter sentence. The way that you can tell if your sentence lengths are strange is really just to read them aloud and see how they flow, right? Okay, so those are some 6 tips that can help you with your clarity. All right, help you with clarity in your writing. And so some final reminders on clarity, what I'd like to leave you with. Remember that clarity issues can be about smaller picture issues like the word choices, right? Abbreviated versus the word short, mitochondrial infarction versus heart attack, right? Or something smaller like using active voice. But then clarity can also be about big picture issues like what do you choose to keep in your story? What content? And when you're talking about bigger picture issues with clarity, what you want to do is ask yourself, what do my readers need to know to fully understand this story or this issue that I'm writing about? Right? Have I included too much information and it's confusing them, or it's kind of adjacent information and not really integral to the story? So dealing with clarity might mean you need to cut some of your writing or you need to add some writing to help someone understand. But regardless of if you're cutting or adding, just remember that when you're writing for media outlets and writing for media products, you want to remember your ABCs of media writing. You want to remember that they work together to create the best media writing possible. So just remember accuracy, brevity, and clarity. All right, you guys have a great week.